Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Matt S., Sean M., Nick W., Brent S., Todd A., and Mark R. On the podcast today is a returning guest and a new guest of a company that has been on the program in the past, Mr. Brian Reinsborough, President and CEO, and also Chris Sembritzky, Senior Vice President Exploration, is with us, representing ReconAfrica, an onshore Namibian-focused oil and gas exploration company, which holds concessions over about 6.3 million acres of untested and prospective oil and gas plays in both Fold Belt and Rift Basin styles within the region. The company also has concessions totaling 1.9 million acres in Botswana, as well as newly announced memorandum of understanding surrounding concessions of 5.2 million acres in Angola. The company is presently preparing to commence drilling on its Prospect I target in Namibia. The company also has a partnership with Norway-listed oil producer BW Energy. ReconAfrica is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol RECO, as well as on US OTC markets under the symbol RECAF. Brian, good to have you back. Chris, welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions.
Andrew, it's great to have you back again. I always enjoy our discussions. Thank you.
Andrew, yeah, excited to be here with you and a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for having me on today.
Guys, good to have you on the program here. I want to get to company news and updates in a moment, but Chris, since you are new to the program, as customary, we like to have our guests take a few minutes and cover off their background and relevant experience in the oil and gas exploration sector. Chris, go ahead and start with that.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Chris Sembritzky, I'm a geologist by background. Started with a company called Anadarko Petroleum back in 2001. I worked with Anadarko for about 20 years in a number of capacities, primarily on the international realm and exploration and development. So about 90% of my time with Anadarko was in exploration and development. Also had a background in business development as well as new ventures and operations. So when I left the company in 2020, I was the vice president of exploration and operations. So I really looked after most things that were international, with the exception of Mozambique. Worked 40 different countries for the company. Was based in London for about 8 years, so with a focus on Africa as well as Middle East and Russia. But I've really worked across the planet. 14 of those countries out of the 40 that I worked were in Africa. I feel like Africa is a little bit of my other home. Spent a whole lot of time there. One of the things that I really enjoy about Namibia is just how easy it is to work. The business environment is extremely transparent. The infrastructure is all there for us, whether it's roads, whether it's ports, whether it's highways, all of that exists. But one of the things that we're always concerned about working in places like this, and specifically investors may be concerned about Africa, one of the things with Namibia is there's a very strong rule of law. The courts are well established. There's a transparent legal system. There's a transparent fiscal system. There's a proven record of contract stability. These things are extremely important when you're thinking about above ground risk. And of course, security is not a concern for us, and the operational environment where we are in Northeast Namibia is very benign. So as far as Africa, Namibia is an absolute gem, and it's been a real pleasure to work in country with the government, with our partners, NAMCOR and BW Energy. So a little bit on the history of kind of Recon. I came in about a year and a half ago, and there were 3 wells that were drilled within the basin, the Kavango Rift Basin, when I came in. And the team really were bold with what they were doing. They really were going off of basically old geologic maps and gravity magnetics. So this is really Wild West frontier type stuff. But the bold move is they ended up finding sediments in the Rift Basin. They didn't even know if a basin was truly there. So that was extremely powerful. In addition, when we went through the Rift Basin, we also came into another basin called the Awambo, and that takes us into the Fold Belt. So The nice thing about Recon's portfolio right now is we have two different play types. Again, one being the rift and one being the full belt. And we'll go into a lot of detail of kind of what we have found and where we're heading here with our new Prospect I.
Chris, thank you. Appreciate that. And definitely Anadarko, household brand really for a lot of folks, especially North America folks know it well, and of course around the world. Very good experience here, and certainly for Brian to attract talent such as yourself to come here and take a look at what's happening at ReconAfrica, I think that speaks a little bit to some of the efforts that are being made here, as well as the prospectivity of the assets that are on the ground there. Botswana, Angola, and Namibia, the focus place. Namibia first and foremost. All of those neighboring countries very close together. You could certainly argue they're all essentially the same play if you want to expand it to that extent. Brian, I'd like to get into updates here, and Chris will jump in here as well, but we'll start with just your comments and then follow up with Chris. Some of those updates: first, prep work and setup to start punching the exploration well at Prospect I. Talk about where we're at. When is drilling expected to start, to the best that you can give us a date there? The anticipated schedule, as well as when you would expect to see first results arising from this exploration program.
Well, Prospect I really came on the radar as a result of the well from Nagopo, where we found some oil brought over the surface. Once we saw that and started looking at the geology of Nagopo itself, Chris and I and the team really got together and pivoted from our previously planned Kumbundu well to Prospect I. So that was in December. So the ball got rolling really, really quickly. Nagopo really helped de-risk Prospect I a lot. So we went full steam ahead to getting that going. Currently in country, the teams are in the process of road construction. Now that has several phases. The first phase is they have to debush about a 10-kilometer track from the main freeway into our well location. And then they have to do what's called demining, which is a group of about 20 to 30 individuals who walk that path and demine it. We're probably halfway through that right now. They're going through a rainy season in Namibia, so it's there's a little bit of slowness in that process. But once that's done, we'll actually start physically constructing the road and the well site. Everything right now is sort of on track to spud by the end of June. That's what we're holding, and I think we're going to be able to achieve that or something very, very close to that. So it's moving ahead. All our permits are done. With a few extra little water permits to be done, but the location itself was approved a couple of years ago. Unlike Nagopo, this well, Chris and the team, we define location is actually on a seismic line. So we're not dealing with any spatial issues, drilling away from what we can see through seismic. So we think this is a super prospect. This is the company's highest profile well with the best risk profile we've ever drilled. So I'm excited to get things going. In country, they're working as hard as can be to get this online. Once it spuds in, July 1, it's about a 3-month well. So we should expect to have results coming to the market September, October timeframe. So we're super excited about this one.
Brian, that sounds good. Certainly looking forward to seeing the progress and, of course, the updates coming out of the company on this. You said demining. I just want to clarify for the audience, demining from a sense of from World War II demining, or what exactly are you doing there?
Yeah, that's during the revolution of Namibia being annexed and brought in from Germany. There was a civil war in that region between Angola and Namibia. We've demined all our operations for the last 4 or 5 years, and I've never found a single alive artillery. But it's part of the protocols being required in country. So we're going through that process right now. Take about 30 days, and then we move on to construction.
Good that that's being done, because you don't want any surprises in that regard. That's for sure. Chris, anything to add as far as operational updates there and how you're seeing Prospect I?
Yeah, Andrew, I just kind of want to focus on how we come to Prospect I. So you got some of the folks in your audience that are technical, but some that are probably not as familiar with the oil and gas industry and how exploration works. So I want to delve into that just a little bit. Again, Recon originally drilled 3 wells in the Rift Basin, but we ended up encountering the folds underneath. And that wasn't very well understood. A lot of the seismic program was still underway really while the wells were drilling. So they extended that seismic program from east to west. And that's when we started to see these large structures. There's no surface topography that you could see it. Back in the old days, East Texas field, the old timers just saw a little hill and they said, let's drill there. We don't have that. So the seismic allowed us to see essentially a mountain chain that's buried. And if you wanted to look at an analog, it would be something along the lines of what we see in Iran or Iraq with the Zagros. So these are extremely large structures. And that's really one of the big reasons why I came to Recon, because there's very few opportunities that we get to see resources that are potentially in structures this large. In my career, I primarily worked offshore. Those wells would cost $100 to $200 million to really try to find a similar resource number and volume. And so here we're looking at drilling a well that's $15 million for the same resource. So the F&D was extremely attractive. The other thing that I just want to talk about is the Nangopo well, because the Nangopo well is really driving us to Prospect I. And if we talk about some of the basic elements that we look for in exploration, we call them petroleum system elements. So we look for the reservoir. The reservoir essentially is going to be the pore network that's going to hold the oil in storage. And then there's going to be a seal, which needs to cap whatever structure or trap you might have to hold that oil back. So the other third element is going to be the trap or the structure, and that's what these big folds are, this buried mountain chain. But probably the most important is the source rock. So you need a source to generate hydrocarbons. The other elements don't matter. If you don't have hydrocarbons being generated, then we don't really have interest here. And with Nangopo, what we were able to prove is that we did have rocks that seal. We've done core analysis studies that suggest we can hold back extremely large columns of either gas or oil. Additionally, we came across 52 meters of reservoir within a carbonate lithology. So just think about limestone or dolomite. And additionally, as Brian mentioned, we encountered hydrocarbons within the well. So we were able to bring oil to the surface. We've captured the oil. We're doing some work on that right now. So we've got those three elements. Unfortunately, what we missed was the structure, and that really related to, this is a frontier well. There's a lot of times that we bust our pick on the first one. Actually, most times that's what we do. And so with Prospect I, the reason why we're going there is we've got a very, very large structure that's very simple. We can see a lot of the reflections that we want to see that are coherent within the prospect itself. And there's no reason to believe that we won't have the other three components along with the structure. So that's really brought us to Prospect I, and on an unrisked basis, we have a third-party auditor that looks at all of our prospects, and we think there's about 350 million barrels here. So it's extremely significant volume that we're chasing.
Chris, thank you for that. That's good to understand, how you guys are looking at that. And you're absolutely right. And this is hard for investors to sort. And of course, it's been a learning experience over the years with us as well, as those exploration programs and really kind of breaking the pick, as you say, on that first try. And then obviously trying to adjust and hopefully coming up with something on the second try or even third try. We've seen this happen. And then we've seen huge successes down the road as well that were figured out a little bit further down the line that turned into be a great success for the company. Assuming here that you guys don't get the results anticipated, yet of course further evidence will be generated from this program that you would be able to utilize and adjust again. But what would be the next target? Where would you guys go next? Chris, maybe you can start with this. And when would you expect to test that?
So we'll potentially spud in June of this year, potentially July for Prospect I. And then we'll likely have results around September or October that we could disclose. My feeling on Prospect I is if it's completely dry, then it's going to be difficult to continue a story with the full belt, because I think this is the best opportunity. And as I discussed, all those petroleum system elements should be there. But the nice thing about Recon's portfolio is we do have another play type. That play type has not been exploited because the 2D seismic doesn't cover enough area to give us confidence and we can identify a specific structure. So later on this year, we're going to conduct a 3D program. So that's 3D seismic, and that'll be the first 3D seismic program ever conducted in Namibia. And what that allows us to do is really kind of hone in on these leads that we've identified. We don't call them prospects because they're not drill ready, but with the 3D, we'll be able to define these structures. And again, we've already drilled 3 of these wells in the rift, and we know that a structure was not encountered. But what we did find is that we had excellent reservoir, world-class reservoir. So a lot of storage and a lot of ability for the well to deliver oil into the wellbore itself. We've done work on sealing facies. We know that the seals exist, as well as the cores that we took from those wells did contain oil within them. Small amounts of oil, but nevertheless, there's some type of working petroleum system there. So we would head to the Rift with a 3D program later this year, and sometime in 26 we would look to drill our first Rift well based off the 3D seismic.
Brian, any additional comments there?
No, that was good. Chris cut in and out. He's remote now. He's over in Namibia, taking care of a lot of important business. But Full Belt, we think is a great shot on goal on Prospect I. It has, as Chris mentioned, has all the elements for success. The Rift play he and I have always liked, but it's just a matter of prioritization of the inventory. We want to get over there and shoot a 3D survey. And in fact, this will be Namibia's first onshore 3D survey shot. So we're not afraid to take a trailblazing approach on this. And then, we got Angola we just signed up. I'm sure we'll talk about that in just a few moments. We had another 5 million acres up there. We think the Full Belt goes there. The Rift play may very well go. But Chris and his team are going to start evaluating that region here in the next couple of months. We know there's a bunch of oil seeps over there, so the system's working to some extent. We just got to get over and start planning and shooting some seismic to see what we actually have.
I want to talk about Angola now, but just before we do, Brian, Botswana, any immediate plans with Botswana, or is that third on the list?
Yeah, that's the third priority for us right now. We got really attractive acreage in Namibia, and we think we just picked up on-trend acreage in Angola. So those are going to remain our priorities for the next several years, actually.
On that, the company did just recently announce an MOU with the government of Angola, where Recon is operator with, I believe, 80% interest over 5.2 million acres. Talk about this deal and what is envisioned for the rest of the year with this new acquisition.
Good. I mean, this was a big deal. I mean, Chris and I and his team started thinking about this acreage, probably 6 to 8 months ago. We really felt the Full Belt goes up in this area, a good chance to Rift does as well. We had some aerial reconnaissance work that showed us there's a working petroleum system there. So we then embarked on discussions, negotiations with ANPG, and it's taken a while to get to the finish line. But we have 11 million acres. That's a big swath of land. On success, we're well covered for running room. And the thing about particularly Full Belts is that you recall these Full Belts have incredibly large aerial extent, and they typically cross countries. So if we have success here, we're going to be off to the running here to make sure we fully understand the scope and scale of the Full Belt, because it goes up there. So Chris and his team are going to be real busy with that program. We're super pleased with it. We also got control of the acreage with real minimal capital commitment, about $500,000 we have to commit firmly in the first year. And then after that, we have an option to proceed to shoot seismic and hopefully eventually drill a well. So a great job at negotiating a really attractive piece of acreage that very rarely do you get access to in this day and age. Typically, our industry is very fragmented, and you see this broken up to a dozen or so blocks, but we got the whole thing by ourselves and a controlling working interest. So super excited about what we're going to do here.
Brian, just to add to that, and maybe this is a good time for Chris to jump in. Angola is generally off the radar for many out there, especially the investment community. Talk just a little bit about the government there as well, and some of the government's motivation and understanding that natural resource development in these countries is absolutely a huge important wealth creator for the country. Just talk about that.
Yeah, I would say, Andrew, first of all, Angola has been producing oil for a very long time. Former OPEC member. Today, they produce about 1.1 million barrels of oil. So ANPG and the government, they really know what they're doing because they've just got so much experience versus Namibia's, there's no oil being produced and it hasn't been produced. So it's pretty nascent. So, going in and working with them, they really understand the lay of the land. We all speak the same language, although they speak Portuguese. But business is conducted very efficiently there. And again, as Brian said, we've locked up 11 million acres. We're really controlling our destiny here. If Prospect I comes in, we've got additional 19 prospects that we've mapped out in Namibia. probably another 20 prospects that are going to be in Namibia on our acres today. And we see this fold belt extending into Angola, where we captured another 5 million acres there where this fold belt should extend. So we're super excited about the opportunity. We're very excited to work with ANPG over the next couple of years on this project.
And Chris, what do you think that would be in terms of just a little bit more here? I know we're going to do some airborne work, some seismic work. Talk just a little bit about what you would see, just rough schedule. I know this is early days here, that the MOU is only in place now, but just talk a little bit about if everything goes smoothly, you guys are able to conduct some of this pre-work, so to speak. When do you think you'd get in there to do an actual first test as far as a well?
Yeah, so right now, the plan is we're going to do some reconnaissance on ground. So we're going to do some of the stuff that, the old timers did a long time ago. We're looking at geologic maps. We've got gravity and magnetics, and we're going to go in and do some samples. So Brian mentioned that we have some oil and gas seeps within Namibia. We've actually gone out and identified those ourselves, Brian and I. We've had geochemical work done on that. And so both oil and gas are present. We utilize some satellite imagery to help us identify those. So we've got some ground truth, and we tie that satellite imagery so we can see certain minerals in the earth that could be indicative of methane or ethane or propane or even oil, distressed vegetation. And so we've done that work already in Angola. And so we've got an idea of where we want to head. So those seeps give you kind of an idea of where you want to start. The second half of the MOU envisions a 2D seismic program. So we'll go and shoot a number of swaths of 2D. And the 2D is very well equipped to identify some of these larger structures. I would say that there would end up being an additional seismic program, whether that's 2D or 3D, to really hone in on some of these structures. We don't know exactly where they're at, but the trend suggests that we're going to be in the general area. So as far as talking about a well, I would say 2.5 to 3 years out, depending on how the seismic program runs through.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say also depending on how things go with Namibia and how the focus may or may not change depending on how results here on Prospect I come out as well, Chris. So I appreciate that, and certainly provides a lot more grounds, also optionality for the company here to continue work in Angola. And I appreciate the background there. I think a lot of the audience probably wasn't aware of Angola from an oil and gas perspective, let alone obviously a mining perspective as well. Okay, I want to shift over here to capital structure and treasury. Brian, how are we looking here as far as funding to complete work at Prospect I, as well as to carry through the rest of the year? What do you expect there on financing needs? And then also, where are we at with shares outstanding and key shareholders?
Now, in the capital structure, currently we have about $12 million in treasury right now. We have some cash in treasury. We're going to look at probably some different means of financing for the well, seismic, and the remainder of the year. We have a number of different bullets in our arsenal to pull on this. One is our partner may look at buying some more of the concession. Secondly, we have interest in the region. In Angola, there was competition on our MOU. So there may be a source of capital to come in, not only in concession in Angola, but also into our well in Namibia. So, those are the main avenues we're looking at to sort of top up a little bit. I don't need a lot, but may need a little to get the well drilled and completed, and G&A for the year. So that's the status of the capital structure. In terms of shares outstanding, we have about 265 million common outstanding, about 350 fully diluted. So that's where we're at in terms of the share count for the shareholders. The single major shareholder actually was BW Energy. If you recall, they came in last summer and liked what we saw so much, they actually bought a piece of the company as well. So they own 6.5% of the company, and that is their single largest shareholder. So a large tail beyond that. Management itself owns probably less than around 5% or so of the common shares outstanding. So a meaningful a chunk of money. And if you recall, when I came on board as CEO, I put $1 million on the table here because I felt so strongly about what we're doing, both in subsurface wise and also being able to turn around the company and create an organization of scale here. So we're on the right path.
Brian, thank you for covering that off and obviously reminding our audience of BW, and then also there, as far as the interest in the equity, I think that's important to point out and highlight that you guys do have checks written. You're in the game here as well. With respect to community work, the partnerships out there, government relations, and I'll add in, of course, NGO management, a new one that everybody has to deal with these days, especially more so in Namibia when it comes to oil and gas. But maybe, Brian, I'll start out with you, or Chris, if you want to take this, feel free to jump in here. But basically, comments on the community work you guys are doing to keep the community aligned and really those important efforts. And then, of course, government relations, and then, of course, taking care of the NGOs as well.
Yeah, I'll take a first shot at that. We take the social license to operate very seriously in the country. And Recon has invested very heavily in Namibia since we arrived. We committed $10 million from day one and spent about half that right now. And part of that engagement is a very well-defined stakeholder communication plan, all the way from the Minister of Energy down to principals in the schools. We have every level identified, and we have touch points all the way down. In the centralized government, we have tremendous support from MME and the host country NAMCOR in what we're doing. We meet with them frequently. We meet with other ministries of environment, road, and water. We need all of them, but we meet them very regularly and go over what we're talking about right now, which is our investment in the community. Now, in northern Namibia, it's very poor, as you know. Chris mentioned it earlier that people just need to have some basics of life, survival. There's no TVs, no electrical grids up in that region. People live off the land. And what the company did a few years ago was astonishing, and I'm really proud of it, is we drilled 36 solar-powered water wells for the most needy villages in northern Namibia. And now these villages are typically 300 people. They live off the ground. I visited several of them last year to ceremonially hand over these water wells, and it's hard to describe what nothing is, but these people live off nothing. They have nothing. There's no electrical wiring into these villages. They live off the ground. Women had to walk down to the river twice a day to get water for their families. And what we're finding through the government is they're losing about 8 women a year to crocodile-human interface. So the company and the government went on to help solve some of that. And these 36 water wells, for the first time ever in these villages, they have potable water. And I call that a generational investment. It's going to fix the problem for people that are on the ground today. It's also going to help the people of the future have potable water, which they don't have. So that is one element of how seriously we take the social license to operate. When we go in, we want to employ people. Since we've been there, we've employed about 2,400 people through our drilling program, and we've held over 2,500 community engagement meetings. These are meetings with villagers, individuals, landowners, schools, hospitals, whoever may be in the region, to educate them on what we're doing for their part of the country. And keep in mind, this part of Namibia has a high unemployment rate. There's a city up in northern Namibia called Rundu, which our main office is at, operational office. And the unemployment in that city officially is around 65%. Now, unofficially, it's probably 75 to 80%. So you can imagine the amount of employment, the benefit that would do for this region. And as I mentioned earlier, we've employed about 2,400 people on a contract basis over the last number of years. So, if we're successful here, there's going to be multiples of that going forward. We take great pride in our operations. They're very safe, both from people and also on their environment. We have not had a single significant spill in the region. We drill with water-based muds, so not oil-based mud. So what it goes in the ground is very natural. And we're just proud of that, how we operate. We plan to do a lot of good up in this part of the country for the people in all these villages and small towns up in northern Namibia. Now, there's always going to be a very small population that is against you, and that is the case. And we have a couple of very, very small groups, NGOs, that are active. And one thing we've done since I've come on board is really have tightened up our disclosure policies, so that we disclose a very, very clear message to people. And part of that is managing the noise that comes from NGOs. But the oil and gas industry as a whole is exposed to that. We are as well. But we think it's very much been under control. And a large part of that is because of our stakeholder communication plan. We are very, very engaged with communicating people on the ground to know exactly what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and how it's going to benefit them. So that's part of the new DNA for the company. Just as a litmus test of that, we published our first sustainability report last year. And that's something that small cap companies don't do usually. But it was really important for me to have that done because it shows the DNA of the company, it shows the soul of the company. And if people take time to read that, they'll really see and get a grasp on how we do business and how much we take care of the communities that we operate in. So we're going to do more in Namibia, and we're going to do more in Angola. I was in Angola just a few weeks ago, signed this agreement, and the government was so interested in what we did on the ESG program. Maybe they want to have that deployed in Angola, and they want to actually come to maybe and see what we do and how we do it, because Recon's ESG program is considered a gold standard in Namibia. So it's something we want to transpose over to Angola when we get a chance.
One of the things I do want to say is the program of drilling the water wells was something that really brought me, to Recon. Oil companies are primarily perceived as just, going out and producing oil and gas, but giving back to the community, specifically at the level that Recon does for a company of our size, I think is really tells you what kind of company you're dealing with. And I can believe you can hear Brian's enthusiasm about this. And that's something that brings us together in the executive team.
Coming out of pocket for this size of a company to that magnitude is not very common at all. And then also just to be able to complete a water well and deliver it to the community. Brian and I've joked a little bit about this in the past. We just don't see that many NGOs out there doing that for people. They like to influence people with some of their grand ideas, but the reality is, and there's some good NGOs out there, but there's also a ton of horrible ones. I think that really speaks to it, and you guys being able to communicate a clear plan, give back to the community, and if you have success, the employment and the opportunities, these are going to be career opportunities that are going to span decades. I mean, there's no other opportunities out there like that I can compare to. The mining and energy sector is really that gift if companies are successful. So tremendous wealth creation, and I just don't see a lot of those opportunities when it comes from an NGO mission. So I think it's really important to point that piece out to the audience, and people need to understand that. And the reality is the NGOs often come from other countries, most often extremely wealthy countries that have had their time. These NGOs have never experienced on the ground the conditions that a local Namibian has experienced. They don't understand themselves. And so I'll stop beating up on the NGOs, but what you guys have been able to do is really, I think, quite good. And you guys haven't even technically been commercially successful. And so, just imagine if there is some success there on the ground, where this can go in the decades ahead for Namibia and obviously their ambitions to be an oil and gas country as they are starting to show offshore and hopefully onshore here as well through Recon here is my thinking on this. Brian, short of any other comments there that you might want to add, I'm going to couple it with this. I'd like to get your thoughts. I always have to ask our guests about the underlying commodity. WTI oil today is about $62 a barrel, US dollars, of course. Any broad oil and gas market thoughts and your expectations for the market in the coming months? We have interesting economic times out there. We've got policy changes. What do you think about the oil market going forward?
No, that's a very good question. We are in a period of high volatility right now. Because of that, the forward-looking curve on crude has gone down because of that. But if you look back historically, we're going to be okay. There's always going to be perturbations in the curve during these periods of time. They always seem to normalize out going forward. We are bullish oil. Right now, if we find oil, and we found oil already in the GOPA, we hope to have oil scale on Prospect I. But we want to get our oil to the coastline, the market on water, and into Brent pricing. Brent pricing is about $3 or $4 above WTI right now, so mid 60s. These projects are very economic at that level. And in fact, our break even on our projects will be about high $30 per Brent barrel of oil. So a lot of cushion. But given that we're bullish on oil going forward, I think anywhere in the $60, $70 range is very economic, very healthy. What I found in my career, when you have oil too high, the industry is very inefficient at deploying capital, and too low, projects get stalled. So the right bandwidth is sort of in the area we're in right now, $60 to $70 range. So I'm happy with where we are for the time being.
It's interesting. You have a world today that in some places certainly condones oil and is anti-oil.
Yeah.
Yet the very people who are anti-oil have products that they use probably every minute of their lives that have some type of petroleum-based product in it. It's a silly, some of the contradiction, but certainly I think on the basis of anti-oil, that piece of it, some of the policies filtering into governments in certain places where you have permitting challenges where projects just don't even get traction from a permitting standpoint. Then you have all the big oil finds and you have depletion over all these years. So things are getting closed up, things are being depleted. You have to deploy new capital to go find further resources out there. I think that really plays a big piece into suggesting that, all of these pressures are going to show, if not a stable, a higher price in the future here as well. But Chris, you've been in the industry a long time as well. I know you look
Sure.
at it from a different perspective, as from exploration standpoint and operational expertise. But any broad comments on the oil market?
I guess to build off what you're saying there, we're really perceived as companies that are going out to provide, let's call it engine oil, right? Gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, these things. But basically, oil is a raw material. I mean, it's in everything in our lives: plastics, paints, the clothes we wear, the synthetic fibers, just chemicals that we use for fertilizers, for pesticides, insecticides, medicines. They're in many of our medicines that we use today. So there's always approach from the other side that oil is bad, but it's just something that is in our everyday lives. We're sitting on it, we're wearing it, we live it, and that's just the way it is, and we can't displace it anytime soon. So and then when we talk about Namibia, you're talking about the jobs that they provide, but it's going to change their life. It is going to be life transforming for the whole entire country. There's only a couple million people here in Namibia. So with what goes on offshore and what potentially we could do onshore, we could absolutely transform a country and bring a country out of poverty into just a better environment, right? With life essentials that they don't have access to every day, that we take for granted.
Yeah. And one thing I'd like to add, Andrew, is that oil is going to be around for most of my life, if not all of it and beyond. The transition to renewables, it's been ongoing for the last 5 to 10 years. My observation is that transition has been very uncoordinated and very messy, which means it's going to take longer to really come into the mainstream as an end source of energy. So oil and gas is going to be here for a long period of time, and I can go through some statistics on what barrel provides in a few moments, but it is in all parts of our lives, and we want to play a part of that in a very important country.
Oil is just not energy. Every bit of oil, including byproducts, including even some of the processing chain, some of the waste is really a product for another industry that gets extended there. So it really all gets used, to the best of my understanding of the industry. There's so many things that oil products are in and derivatives of. The renewable part of it, to some degree, you and I have to almost categorize this, and I think you guys can appreciate this, Chris and Brian, that some of this is alternative energy. The bottom line of it is the life cycle of it, the maintenance costs of it, and the capex is really to our detriment. When you look at things like even solar and wind and certain applications, we all know that on an industrial basis, wind and solar don't cut it, and things like renewable hydro make a lot of sense. Another place that is near and dear to us is commercial reactors out there, and why nuclear energy is very important as part of a transition as well. I do think that renewable has stumbled, and I think for good reason. It doesn't work on a super scale that everybody
Yeah.
thought it does. Aside from all the waste, aside from all the capex and all, I guess, cradle to grave total impact, and that whole quality of energy discussion that you would have about, is this really viable? And that's why the term alternative energy is used. Brian, with that, maybe take a barrel of oil for us and talk to us about how you see this goes through the processing chain and all the different products of where this would go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting when you look at it. A couple things before I get into my sort of description of what a barrel of oil can do. A lot of people don't realize the cost and time required to bring a barrel to market. It's not like you find it and bring it to market within weeks or months, particularly offshore. If you find a barrel of oil, quite often the cycle time to bring that barrel to market can be up to 10 years, maybe a little bit beyond that. Now, onshore, we think we have some cost advantage and access to infrastructure, But we think we find something this year, we'll bring it on in about 2 years from now. And that's fast. So the audience needs to understand just the time requirements to bring oil on. Now, oil touches 70 parts of our lives, and just to give the audience a little bit of context on what can 1 barrel of oil produce, and I'll go through some petroleum products that we don't usually think of first, but then on some other stuff. So 1 barrel of oil, it can provide enough gas for 12 small cylinders for home camping and workshops. So those small cylinders are all so used to those 14 ounces. 1 barrel of oil can produce about 12 of those. It can produce enough gasoline for a mid-sized car to drive about 280 miles. Enough lubricants for a quart of oil for motor oil, and about 4 pounds of charcoal briquettes. So everybody barbecues. It's in that part of our business as well. But it also is in so many other plastics and derivatives. Polyester shirts, combs, toothbrushes, dustpans, hoops, drinking cups. All this stuff is a product of a barrel of oil that it touches almost every part of our life, other than the more normal ones I went over, trucks and cars and airplanes. So it's needed, it's embedded, it's not going anywhere. We're super pleased to be able to provide a slice of that supply going forward, but it's going to be needed for the next many decades.
Well, you guys can appreciate this being from Texas, I have to say it, and not a promotion, but actually it's a good program. The recent Landman series that was put out, season 1, fantastic in terms of just the monologue that was done there in terms of why it's so important, and the fact that we just don't have a good replacement for energy. Yeah, we've had a replacement for oil energy for many, many decades, and that is the commercial reactor industry. But you can understand from a coal lobby and an oil lobby standpoint why it would be at least suppressed and held up. It is superior, let's be honest. But the industry, the oil industry, has so much more to it besides just energy, and it's going to be around. Brian's being kind within his lifetime. We're going to be on it for a long time. And I just don't see us getting off of it right now because I don't see the alternatives. I mean, there's just so many reasons why it doesn't go away, and the importance of it and how it has improved our lives, contrary to what people would say about pollution and these types of things. But we've all been brought out of very terrible conditions as a result of this industry. I'll leave it there. I don't want to beat that up too much, guys. But Brian, short of anything else to add here, why don't we wrap it up? And of course, Chris, chime in here as well. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 155 million Canadian dollars here. Why should Recon Energy Africa be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors' portfolio at this stage?
Let me start, and Chris can finish off. Listen, we spent the last 2 years really changing out this company, top to bottom, from management to board of directors to technical people. Chris onboarding and his team, they have fundamentally changed the technical story of ReconAfrica, fundamentally. And I say that with I don't say that very often, but they have really changed the story to understand the subsurface, understand the potential. And if investors like coming into Recon a year ago from Nagopo well, they should love coming into Recon today, because Nagopo has helped de-risk our next prospect so much. And we're chasing 500 million barrels here. So, that's extremely meaningful for a company our size. And I would contend in the small cap space, I don't see any other company that has such explosive growth ahead of them as what Recon does. We're so well positioned. Our understanding of the geology is so much more advanced than it was than just a couple of years ago, that we're well positioned. And we got ahead of ourselves and got even more acreage in Angola. We want to make sure the acreage was captured before we got the results of Prospect I. So it gives you a little bit of glimpse on what we think the potential of the company is. We're oil, we're all ours are on cycle time, refined oil, generate cash, and get the company to have some really strong fundamentals underneath it going forward. But now is a great time to get in. We've seen some softening in the macro market that's hit Recon as well. So, you're great value right now, even to where we were 3-4 months ago. So I think it's a great story to get into, and it's probably one you can't see globally in the small cap market space.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reiterate a little bit of what Brian said and add a little bit more to it. But Nangopo taught us so much. We've learned so many lessons, and what you want to learn from a well is how can you de-risk the next prospect. And I think we've really done a good job of doing that. Again, going back to the four elements, we're just missing one, and we feel like, there's very low risk of missing the structure here. Again, you're going to learn from that initial well and take those learnings and move forward. And that's what we're doing. Additionally, I just want to reiterate the acreage position of 11 million acres. As Brian is saying, a small cap company, you're not going to find this type of position. It's a position that's aggregated as one as well. Additionally, we have two separate plays. Normally you're going after one. We've got one that's extremely large in the Fold Belt, and then we've got one that's got world-class reservoir within the rift itself, and both are oil prone. And the cycle time, again, onshore is so much quicker than anything that happens offshore. 2 to 3 years, we're trucking oil and we're bringing in revenue, versus if you're offshore, you're probably looking at timeframes of 5 to 10 years. So, and additionally, I'll touch back on cost. Because we are onshore and we've discovered this Fold Belt, our cost structure is so much lower than what you would see offshore, and we're chasing major resources that major oil companies go after. But we have it here exposed to us with the seismic data, with the well data, and we're just in a really good area to have large exposure to a tremendous resource of oil.
Chris, thank you for that. I think that adds a good perspective as well on how you're looking at this. Brian, for further information, what is the best way for folks to make contact?
Well, the best information is going to our website and clicking through the investor link there, send in questions. You can buy our stock, of course. We're on the Toronto Venture Exchange, on RECO and RECAF. That's the best way to get in and look at our where the stock's trending, and I'd love to have you as a shareholder.
Brian, well, thank you for the update. Chris, great to have you on for the first time and to have you introduce yourself, and certainly another fine asset add here to Recon Energy Africa having you on board. And we're looking forward to you guys coming back in the near future to update on progress.
Thank you so much for having us. Enjoyed the discussion as always.
Thank you, Andrew.